Well, good morning from St. Bart's in Midtown Manhattan. My name is Peter Thompson. I serve as vicar and interim rector here, and whether you're joining us in person on Park Avenue or online at stbarts.org, it is really great to have you here for the forum where each week we have sacred conversations about the things that matter. And this week we are excited to welcome back our very own Julie Ross, who is the executive director of Parenting Horizons, an organization devoted to enriching children's lives through parent and teacher education. She co-hosts the podcast, the Parenting Horizons podcast, and she's the author of several books, including what's currently available in our bookstore, How to Hug a Porcupine, Negotiating the Prickly Points of the Tween Years. As we are continuing our series in this time of transition for our community, in which we're hearing the wisdom from those within our community about how to navigate change and transition, it's good to have Julie here to speak on the intriguing title, Change is Good, You Go First. Julie, this is not your first time at the forum. No. It's thank you again for doing this, and we're looking forward to hearing from you.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. A lot of people think because I'm a parenting expert that I'm going to be talking about parenting today. That is not the truth. I'm going to be talking about living, about being adults in the world, about transitions, and about change. So if you came here expecting words of wisdom for parenting your 5-year-old, you're out of luck. Today we're going to talk about, as Peter said, we're going to talk about change. And, you know, change is great, right? We all love it. The anxiety, that pit in the feeling of our stomach. I love that, don't you? Of course not. None of us really like that stress. But I want to break it down into a couple of different types of transitions. Ones that I think we would all consider to be easier and ones that we would consider to be harder. And then I want to further break it down into the harder transitions and why some people have an easier time with a hard transition and some people have a harder time, and how we can get stuck and how we can break out of that stuckness. So if I had to categorize transitions and break it down into just two types, and I'm sure that there are thousands of types of transitions, but for our purposes, we're going to just look at two. The first type of transition is one that I think we would experience as having components of joy. So the transition, graduating from high school, right? That's a big transition. That's change. Or getting married, that's a big transition, that's change. And we see those as, you know, good transitions. And I think the reason is because in those transitions, we have agency, right? We have the ability to affect that transition. And not only that, but we kind of have a little bit of a roadmap for what comes next. Right? There's less of a fear of the unknown in that type of transition. So I think we mostly experience those as, you know, not as stressful as the other type. The other type of transition, for our purposes here today, is transitions that are sudden, they're unexpected, they often incorporate loss of some sort, and there's a big fear of the unknown on the other side. We don't have a roadmap for some transitions. So that kind of transition is likely to be more stressful, generally speaking, than the first type of transition. But how about these people who can take that other type of transition, the really stressful transition, and seem to have no problem with it? Well, there's something that we call a think, feel, do cycle. Now, the think, feel, do cycle is a cycle that we get caught in, engaged in, and basically when an event happens, right, we have feelings about that event, right? I mean, I woke up this morning, it's cold out. I have feelings about that. They're not good feelings. I'm not happy, right? So I have feelings about that event. Based on those feelings, and this is true for all people, we take action. So if an event happens and we have negative feelings, we have a tendency to take negative action. So I want to use the example of Dean leaving to kind of talk about that as the event, right? So some people have very, very, let's call them big feelings about that. They feel angry, they feel betrayed, they feel left out, they feel bewildered and shocked, right? So that's category one, right? They have these big feelings about it. You have the same event, right? The same exact event, Dean is leaving. And person B feels content about it. They're okay. You know, their feelings are neutral. Maybe not positive, but they're neutral. And so based on those feelings, they behave in a more neutral way. Now, here's the problem with that model, right? It's not the event, feel, do model. It's a think, feel, do model. In between the event and how we feel about the event is what we think about the event. And often those thoughts are so fleeting that we don't recognize that they're there. So if we find ourselves stuck in a negative cycle, it's generally because we haven't stopped and paused to self-reflect about what am I thinking about this event. So person A in this scenario with Dean, exact same event, Dean leaving, person A's thought may be, why didn't I know about this? Why is he leaving? He's abandoning the parish at a crucial moment, right? Those are feelings. I mean, those are thoughts that are leading to those negative feelings. Let's take person B. Person B isn't being callous. Person B's thought may be, you know what, good for him. He needs this. He's going to go down to Texas to be with his son and daughter-in-law. She's of childbearing age. He said this to me, and Texas is not a great place to be right now. So he wants to be down there for that family, right? For his family. So person B's feelings are neutral, maybe even happy that he's getting to do this where many people don't get to have that experience. So we've got these two very different feelings. The problem, of course, is not person B is probably fine, right? Person A can get caught in that feedback loop if we don't go back and break into the cycle and change our thought processes actively. Now, that is not easy to do. And I'm going to make no bones about it. Changing our thoughts requires a lot of self-reflection. It requires a lot of reframing to get out of that negativity. And here's why that's so hard. It's so hard because stress kicks in a biological response. It kicks in a biological response that used to be helpful for survival, but is no longer that helpful. So what does that mean? The biological response that it kicks in is what we call fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, right? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. Now let me explain why it was helpful for survival. You're in your cave, right? You hear a roar, and it's a saber-toothed tiger, right? So this response kicks in. Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, survival. So fight is an aggressive approach to the saber-toothed tiger in this scenario. And so what that could look like is you get a club from your cave and you go beat the saber-toothed tiger into submission and it leaves. It served you, right? You saved whoever else is living in that cave with you. It's a valid response to stress. I want to keep emphasizing that. It's a valid response to stress. The second, in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, the second response is flight, running, getting out of the way of danger, of a stressful situation, right? So in that response, you might know that in your cave, you've got this little tiny cave in the back, you know, a sub-cave. And so you might flee from the saber-toothed tiger knowing that even if the tiger comes into the cave, it won't be able to reach you because you've fled. Again, survival, good stuff. The third type of response is freeze. And I'm going to talk in a moment about a freeze response that I had and how I got out of that freeze response. But the freeze response is like playing dead, lying low. So we have a rabbit. Yes, in an apartment, we have a rabbit. Yes, they're great pets. Yeah, I'll answer all your questions. Yes, they live a long time. Yes, she wanders around our house. Yes, she's very cuddly. We took her for her well visit to the veterinarian. Now, she is the most cuddly, loving, warm, sweet bunny. She's also a prey animal, right? She doesn't love to be picked up. She will come up, she'll jump up and be next to you, but she doesn't like to be picked up. Well, going to the vet is going to necessitate her being picked up. But you know what? She was fine. Why? Stress. She froze. She just sat there. It was her best way to get out of this believably tall human being touching her in places she didn't want to be touched. So she froze. It's an animal response. Again, I'm going to come back and talk about a freeze response that I had and how I got out of it, because that's really the thing, right? How do we get out of these responses that are ultimately maladaptive in today's world? The fawn response is when we give up something of ourselves, right, to appease the saber-toothed tiger, right? So back in survival days, that would look like, maybe you get a piece of meat, right, from your stash in the back of the cave, and you fling it as far as you can so the saber-toothed tiger goes after it. Well, you've just lost a very important thing because you've given up the meat that you're going to survive on. In today's world, we see the fawn response a lot with victims of domestic abuse. So victims of domestic abuse are, they try to placate. They try to make excuses to go back to this person. They forgive easily. That's the fawn response in modern day culture. So if we think about those responses in modern day culture, they're not very helpful. They don't move us forward in any way. They keep us stuck in this cycle, which is going to be problematic because there's another thing that comes in a minute. But I want to talk specifically about a freeze response that I encountered this past year myself. So some of you know, if you're regular attendees of St. Bart's, some of you know or may know that my daughter and her twins were on the prayer list for a long time, 8 months, maybe 9, something like that. And so just to give you a little background about pregnancy, pregnancy, the full term of pregnancy goes to 40 weeks, all right? Viability, which is the first point at which a child can live outside the womb, right? And not that they will, is 26 weeks, right? So that's the first point at which they can, but not necessarily will, live outside the womb. So our daughter got pregnant last January. We were all excited, right? Because we have an older grandson who's now 5, and we were so excited. She got pregnant. Yay! At 10 weeks, they discovered it was twins. Double yay! 2 for the price of 1. This is awesome, right? At 13 weeks, her water broke. 13 weeks. She called us and told us that her water had broken. I froze. I can't speak for my husband, though I suspect it's true too. When you freeze, you literally shut down. I couldn't cope with this. I don't know that I ate. I certainly didn't sleep. The biological mechanism shut me down. So the next thing, she went to the hospital, went to her doctor, who said, well, there are 2 strong heartbeats. But yes, the amniotic fluid is extremely low for baby B, and there will not be a heartbeat a week hence. Well, that shut me down further. I froze again. And so a friend of mine, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about how she was helpful in this, and I'll tell you the rest of the story too. I'm not going to leave you hanging. But my friend said, listen, we were in a class together, and she said, are you coming to class? And I said, I don't know. I don't think I can. And she said, do you want to get a cup of coffee? And I said, I don't know. I don't think I can. And she said, let me rephrase that. Meet me for coffee at such and such a place and such a time, right? Meet me for coffee at such and such a place. And that my legs then moved, right? And I was able to do that. Well, I should say that this friend is also a psychotherapist. So she kind of knew exactly the right thing. I walked in. She'd already ordered the coffee for me. So I didn't even have to do that, right? How kind is that person? I walked in, and I immediately started to cry. And she just held my hands. She loved me up. And I said, I don't think that there's any way that this can turn out okay. I don't think there's any way. 13 weeks, amniotic fluid. There's no way she'll get to 26 weeks. I don't think it's possible. Now let's add to that. There was no ability for a selective abortion. She lives in Texas. So basically what we were told was that if she developed an infection, not only would both babies die, but she would too. They couldn't do anything. They wouldn't be able to do anything. They probably wouldn't be able to get her out of the state and find somebody to do that, to remove a dead fetus from her womb in time to save her life if she went into sepsis. I mean, this is big stuff, right? This is super stress. So I said to my friend, I spilled all of this to my friend, and she held my hands, and she said, what are the facts? I'm like, what do you mean, what are the facts? Are you out of your mind? I just told you all the facts. And she said, no, just back up and let's do the facts. And I said, okay, Emily's water broke at 13 weeks. She said, that's a fact. I said, both babies' heartbeats are strong. That's a fact. I said, the doctor said that there won't be a heartbeat in a week. She said, that's not a fact. I said, what do you mean? The doctor said that. She said, that's a fact that the doctor said that. But it's not a fact that there won't be heartbeat or a heartbeat. That is projection. That is opinion. That is based on statistics which we know can be completely off, right? So that grounded me. That brought me back out of the freeze component. And I went, stick to the facts. Now, I won't say that I didn't freeze at various other points in time. It was a very, very stressful period of time. To just conclude that story so that you guys are not wondering, because it is a stressful story to hear, she did make it to 26 weeks. She went into the hospital at 24 weeks. They suspect that baby A, whose name is Ezra, scooched down and blocked baby B's amniotic fluid from continuing to leak. And baby B's amniotic fluid filled back up so that his lungs developed. The water was still broken, the sac was still ruptured, but Ezra scooched around. And this is the belief by the doctors and the nurses, right? So boy, was that doctor wrong, right? Yet, if you look at all of the evidence, this is a modern day miracle. It's being written up in medical journals. It doesn't happen. It has not happened before. So yes, she made it to 26 weeks. Yes, she did go into sepsis in the hospital. Yes, they were able to deliver both babies. And yes, the babies are home and healthy and doing well. They are almost 6 months adjusted, which would be 9 months since the womb, right? Well, obviously, that's a de-stressor, that's great. In the middle of it, though, and those months and months, they had to be in the NICU for 3 months. Those months and months and months, what are the facts? What are the facts? Okay, baby, B is on oxygen. Baby A is on oxygen. Okay, those are the facts. So and as a family, we worked through that, right? So what are the facts is one of the ways that we can break ourselves out of this biological response that really isn't helpful. And what are the facts? It can be if you're in the aggression thing, what are the facts? So, and I'm sure you have all experienced this, right? Maybe you're traveling in a car with someone, that person's driving. I'm not throwing my husband under the bus here. Well, maybe a little bit. That person's driving, right? My husband. And I'm sitting in the passenger seat, and he's stressed because we're having to merge highways or whatever it might be. He's stressed. I don't know that, right? So I say something like, don't you think we should take Route 9? And he goes, don't direct me. And I'm like, it was just a suggestion, right? But he's in the anger response, right? So my knowing that anger response is not anger, it's stress, is helpful for me, right? And him realizing that snapping at me, he's not angry at me. He's stressed about what route to take out of New York City, right? So when we So when we think about that, I can say to myself, what are the facts? Well, the facts are, maybe we missed an exit, maybe there's another exit. The facts are, he's stressed. Okay, I don't have to react myself to that. And he can get out of that reaction himself by asking himself, okay, what are the facts? Now, going back to the think, feel, do cycle, I can't promise you that this is easy to break out of these cycles. It's not. It requires self-reflection. It requires understanding what's going on in terms of our feelings first. And you know what? I'm not a big fan of feelings. I don't know about you guys, but I'm really over that whole thing. I think that they are highly overrated, especially, the negative ones, forget about it. The positive ones, all right, sometimes. But despite being over that, Brené Brown says, we are feeling creatures who sometimes think. Now, if you are not familiar with Brené Brown, familiarize yourself now, because she is a phenom. She's the most, talks about empathy, and she's amazing. We are feeling creatures that sometimes think. If we are over feelings, if we're like, forget feelings, I don't want to have feelings anymore, and we bury those feelings, right? We're burying the majority of ourself. And that leads to no good for anyone. One of the things that can happen when we bury all of those feelings is that they can come out in physical ways. So if you've ever had your back go out, if you've ever had a headache, unexplained, right? If you've ever unexplained knee pain, and as we all get older, that kind of happens a lot. Sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes my therapist used to say, if I had a backache, what's breaking your back? Wow, right? Or if I had, if I had woken up wrong in my shoulder, what burden are you trying to shoulder right now? Or what's the headache in your life right now, right? Sometimes a headache is just a headache. Sometimes you have a fever and that gives you a headache, right? Sometimes you've twisted yourself and so, I pulled something in my back. But sometimes we have repressed feelings that are coming out in these physiological ways. And the other thing that happens is that neural pathways start to form. And what that means is, let's say Christmas, picking a nice holiday, but still, Christmas is a stressful time for you, right? It is for a lot of people. We think of it as, oh, it's joyful and that kind of thing, but it can be very stressful. So Christmas is a stressful time for you. And one Christmas, your back went out, right? And there's a small association that happens in your neural pathways between my back goes out at Christmas. Maybe it doesn't happen the next Christmas, but maybe it happens on the next holiday, right? That neural pathway gets solidified, and pretty soon, stress equals my back goes out. Whether it's Christmas, whether it's trying to pull off a birthday party for someone. So suppressing our feelings when we are feeling creatures who sometimes think is not a good idea. The other thing that it does when we repress those feelings and get stuck in that negative cycle, the other thing it does is it prevents us from going through a necessary process, and that's the grief process. Nobody likes that either. I'm like, oh, grief, that sounds like fun. The grief process, though, is necessary for getting through, especially for getting through loss, right? We have to go through it. So I want to talk a little bit about what that process looks like. Many of you are probably familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who defined 5 stages of grief. There has since been work done in the same field that really has expanded it to 7 or maybe 8 stages of grief, right? So let's talk about what that looks like. So the newly revised edition, the first stage is shock. When we experience a loss, especially, or especially something that's extremely stressful to us. Shock. Then there's denial. Then there's anger. Then there's bargaining. Then there's testing. And testing is when we try to figure out solutions to a particular problem. Like coming here to the forum, right? What are the solutions if I'm experiencing something that's stressful and that is a form of loss? Testing. Then there's acceptance. Am I on 6 or 7?
6.
Oh, what did I leave out? Anger, bargaining, depression. I left out depression. Thank you for counting for me. I appreciate that. So depression. Now I would add, and others didn't come from me, but I would also add that after acceptance, there's finding meaning. And to me, that's a spiritual state. Finding meaning in life circumstances. Now here, because nothing's easy, here's the problem with the stages of grief. It's not like they're linear. You don't go, you don't get on an escalator or stair steps and, okay, I'm no longer shocked. Yay, I get to move into denial. Woo, I'm in denial now, right? So you get into denial. Then there's anger. Well, at least you know it's a stage, right? You're going to get out of that stage, and you're going to be in bargaining, and then you're going to be in depression, and then you're going to be in testing, and then it's not linear. It's not an escalator. It is not stair steps. It's an elevator. So you can start on floor 8. Oh, I find the meaning in this, right? Then you can go to floor 2. I'm in denial about all of this. Then you can go to floor 5, and then to 1, and then to... I wish it were linear, and this is kind of why I hate feelings, because I can identify them if I know they're going to be linear. That's awesome. But they're not. And yet, the grief cycle is important for us to move through transitions. We have to engage with it actively. Now, what does that mean? It's not like an elevator in that I think I'll press floor 7 and I'll be out of here, right? It's recognizing, again, self-reflection has so much to do with this. It's self-reflection about where am I now? And accepting where I am now and not fighting it and sitting with these very uncomfortable feelings. Now, there are some feelings in the grief cycle that are less uncomfortable. I'm a big fan of denial. I think denial is the best, right? I don't have to feel anything because nothing happened. Awesome, right? It's easy to get stuck in denial, right? Because it's a comfortable place. But the problem with denial is that, well, the problem with denial is you can get stuck there. The positive thing about denial, it's a resting space. So everybody says, don't be in denial. Well, sometimes you have to take that break. You have to take that breath in that phase. I think Zach, maybe last week's sermon, said, breathe and then push, right? He was talking about how, you know, we can learn from midwives, right? Breathe and then push. I would look at denial as that space in which we can breathe. I've also heard it phrased okay, I'm going to make an admission here. I don't really know much about any kind of sports. And wrestling is a sport, right? So in wrestling, and maybe boxing, the phrase is take the 8. So what that means is if you're knocked down to the floor, don't get right back up. Take the 8 counts to recover before you get back out. You have till 10 before you're considered done or something, whatever the terminology is. I apologize for my horrible lack of knowledge. But I thought that was really important. Take the 8, breathe, and then push. So in breathing, remember what are the feelings that you're currently having. You may not want to identify them because they may not be particularly comfortable. And yet, these are the feelings that will move you through this process. What are these feelings? Now, I'm going to give one more little, maybe it's a tip. There are various ways that we handle transitions. I think one of the things that we fail to do is recognize how many transitions we've all been through already. We have been through so many transitions, starting from learning to walk, right? That's a transition. And we do it kind of well when we're young, you know, because we get up to walk and we fall down, and we get up to walk and we fall down. We don't let that falling down deter us from learning to walk. We get a little bit more cautious when we're adults, right? But we have been through so many transitions. You are more resilient than you think you are. You already have tools in your toolbox that will help you get through this transition with Dean leaving, that will help you get through the next transition. And if you don't have a particular tool, you can seek one out. My friend Lizzie gave me a tool that I didn't have before. What are the facts, right? There's no prescription for getting through transitions or stress or grief, but there is a toolbox. And what that means is maybe sometime you'll pick out the wrong tool. Maybe you'll pick out the screwdriver, right? And what you really need is the hammer. That's okay. You try that tool. Doesn't work, doesn't mean you give up. You say, what other tools do I have in my toolbox? And you pull out that tool, the next tool, and you move forward with that. Experiment with it, right? So some of your tools may be reading a book, immersing yourself in literature, right? Some of your tools may be exercise, right? That's a great tool. One of your tools may, I hope now, be what are the facts? You know, one of your tools may be meditation. And not every tool is going to work for everybody. I'm terrible at meditation. Terrible. I've tried. It sounds wonderful. It really does. It sounds really great. I've never been able to do it. And every once in a while I go, I'm going to try meditation again. And it just doesn't work. And somebody will say, well, here's how you have to do it. That just destroys the whole thing for me. So that may or may not be your tool, right? Think about the tools that you have in your toolbox. Recognize the feelings that you are engaged in. Figure out if you're engaged in a negative loop of fight, flight, freeze, or fawn of the think, feel, do cycle, right? And then, or if you are in actually the stages of grief, and how you can sit with that and be okay with that. That's it for me, Peter. How am I doing?
Thank you so much, Julie. Lots
You're
of
welcome.
wisdom there. In fact, someone in the chat online said, you're telling me just what I need to hear this morning. So there's someone out there that is especially grateful.
I'm so glad.
We have just a few minutes for your questions. If you're here in the room, raise your hand. Suzanne Forster will come around with question cards, and then you can fill one of those out and she'll bring those up to me. If you're joining us online, you can type your questions into the live chat on YouTube, the comments on Facebook, or email me, pthompson@stbarts.org. So your talk today is not about parenting and growing up, but I'm curious, as someone who has walked with a lot of kids and youth in that process of growing up and change, what lessons we adults can learn from the change our young ones go through?
I think the advantage that young people have over us older people, over us wiser people, I don't know, how do I phrase that so that it's not horrible, is young people are filled with hubris. They think they can do anything. They can conquer the world. I remember when my daughter was 8. She had never ridden a horse before, okay? She was going to camp where there was horseback riding, and the camp had sent a questionnaire. How, in terms of riding expertise, how expert are you? And she said, oh, I'm an expert rider. What? The horse she had ridden was the carousel horse. The hubris is delightful. It's why I love our youth group. I love working with them. They are full of life and energy, and they haven't been beaten down by the world like we have. So I think, generally speaking, and I'm going to make a caveat to that, generally speaking, kids handle transitions a little bit better than adults do. Now, having said that, we experienced a really big transition, all of us, during COVID. And that wreaked havoc on the population of youngsters, right? Their development was delayed. They didn't get to experience whatever firsts were due to them, whether they were in kindergarten or elementary school or adolescence. It halted their development, and it made them, I think quite rightly, more wary of transitions, because that was a biggie. So real life kind of took over there. And I think we're still helping our young people regroup from that. I think we're still helping ourselves regroup from that. And the hardest thing, I think, is how can we help young people when we ourselves are still grieving something? And that goes for whether it's COVID or kind of anything else. And I don't have a prescription. I wish I could write you a prescription. You could go to CVS, you could fill it, and then you could take that, whatever it is, and be there. But it's really about this self-examination, ultimately, and knowing where we are and getting ourselves through that grief process.
So I asked this question of Trish 2 weeks ago, but you and Steve, I don't know if you want to say exactly how long you've been running the youth group.
Over 30 years.
For several decades.
Over 30.
And wonderful leadership in that. You've seen some transitions here at St. Bart's because you were associated with St. Bart's in various capacities before that.
Yes.
You've had transitions in rectors. You've also had transitions in the priests who have worked with the kids and youth and other staff
Yes.
members. So you've had the macro transition and more micro transitions. In a church context, what advice, wisdom do you have for undergoing transition in the church context specifically?
Don't lose your love. Don't lose your love. That's something that can be consistent through grief, through fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, through everything. So the way in which Steve and I never lost our love for this place, but even more specifically for the young people here. Don't lose your love. Don't let it get buried. It can, because we can get so involved in anger, especially, that we can forget the love, the deep love, and the things that we have for this place, for the congregation, in our case, for the young people. We can forget that that is part of why we're here to begin with, is the love. And ultimately, obviously, the love of God, right?
All right, so we have just a few minutes left, but I'll try to get through both of the submitted questions. What if the facts and focusing on the facts makes you even more overwhelmed? So you've encouraged us to think about what are the facts as a way of kind of grounding you and not getting lost, but what if the facts themselves are so terrifying, anxiety-ridden, overwhelming?
Mm-hmm. So I have two kind of answers to that. One is that, yes, facts can be overwhelming, no question, right? If the facts, in my daughter's case, had turned out to be more traumatic than they were, if she had lost that baby or those babies or her life, obviously, that is a far worse situation. And then the grief process comes in. You have to grieve if it's that much. Anxiety is an interesting thing, because anxiety is the illusion of control. Anxiety is the illusion of control. So what that means is we think that we can, the anxiety, well, what if this, what if that, what if this, what if that, what if this? Remember, those what ifs are not facts anyway, but it's easy to get into an anxiety spiral. What if this, what if this? We somehow think that if we imagine the worst case scenario, right, that we will be spared the feelings if the worst case scenario happens. Brene Brown calls that foreboding joy. And I think that's, that blew my mind, because I'm an anxious person. And so the other thing I would say is, if you're anxious about something that hasn't happened, you suffer twice. If that thing does happen, you suffer twice. So we think we're controlling it. We think, oh, no, if I'm anxious, it'll be, then I can control the outcome. We can't. The other thing about anxiety is it lies. It is a big old fat liar. And it perches on your shoulder and it whispers things into your ear, and you have to ignore it. I call it looking into a negative crystal ball. So in parenting, one of the things that happens often for parents of teenagers is a parent will come to me and say, oh no, I found an airplane-sized bottle of alcohol in my child's room, in my teenager's room. They're going to become an alcoholic. I have heard this. I've been in this business for over 30 years. I've heard this hundreds of times. They're going to become an alcoholic. I say, really? Yes, yes. Well, was the bottle open? No. Was there more than one? No. Did you find some in the trash? No. Was it a big bottle? No. What makes you think that's going to happen? Anxiety lies to us, and it makes us look into a negative crystal ball. We have to talk back. We have to talk back to anxiety. And we have to say, is it facts? Or is it this little demon of anxiety that's on my shoulder whispering bad things?
All right, very quickly, you said that meditation is not for you.
I wish it was. I know there's a meditation group here. I know.
There are several, actually.
Oh, I love that.
So it works for some people.
It does. It works great.
So if not mindfulness, what strategies do you have for kind of acknowledging the feelings? How do you kind of, this person says, get the feelings out?
Well, I think maybe some people would call the way I do that meditation. I don't necessarily. I don't know, meditation is a much more loftier process that I engage in. But I would say that recognizing the pit in your stomach, so recognizing the physiological things first, a pit in your stomach, your back went out, your headache, and taking a moment, just a moment, to say, what's going on with me? Asking yourself that question. If you have a therapist, you can ask your therapist that question. They may or may not be able to answer. They may pull it out of you. But if you don't have a therapist, you can just talk it out with a friend. You can just sit for a minute. You can journal. A lot of people do well with journaling. My daughter is a big journaler. And I mean, bookcases full of journals that she's had since before she could write. And she would dictate to us. Journaling is good. It's a way of processing, right? So it is about self-reflection in the way that meditation, I think, is too. So maybe I'm selling myself short. Maybe I meditate more than I really think I do. But I think those of you who actually actively do it are really stars in the universe.
Well, there's so much more we can say, but unfortunately we have to stop there. Please join me in thanking Julie Ross.
Thank you. Thank you all. I appreciate it.
And a quick reminder that Julie's book, How to Hug a Porcupine, Negotiating the Prickly Points of the Tween Years, is available in the bookstore. Next week, we will continue with our series focusing on wisdom about transition from within our own community. Meredith will be here with Ray Vandenberg and Bob Kiley. The three of them co-lead together our retirement group, talking about retirement as a time of transition. So hope you'll be back next week for that. Hope you'll also join us for worship at 11 a.m., whether in person or online. Thanks for being here.